I think Season 3, Episode 5 of House of the Dragon is a good lesson in how they are approaching the source material. While yes, it is still technically an adaptation, in my mind I do view it more as inspired by or an interpretation of Fire and Blood. Even though, yeah, by definition of the word, it is still an adaptation of George R. R. Martin's story. While a lot of the events are now drastically different, they are taking themes and story elements of the book and repurposing them in different ways. For example, the end scene with the gold cloaks, dead at the table, is inspired by the book. Specifically when Criston Cole comes across a grisly display of festering corpses, the bodies of men who had fallen at the fish feed. So, while the characters and locations are very different, the show's using the moment somewhere else. It enacts the same feelings. It's a smart way of adapting book content you don't have time or story space to do. But this does often, sadly, come via the butterfly effect of more major changes in the storyline. But I do appreciate effort of repurposing these nuggets of book content. And that's my main talking point with this episode. It's not a coincidence when they include these kinds of things in episodes, or some real deep lore drops, it does elevate it. Was this episode perfect? Of course not. But for the most part, it's better than a lot of what we saw with Season 2, and a significant part of Season 3. For me, Episode 4 and 5 have been a huge step in the right direction, despite the lingering issues with the wider story arcs and some huge creative choices not being to my personal taste. Now, I tend not to follow leaks and spoilers for the show, which is hard given the online nature of this channel, but I will say this one thing and give one bit of advice. Don't take what reviewers who get early access to episodes say too seriously. One of the two things that often tends to happen is you end up getting yourself way too hyped and left feeling underwhelmed afterwards, or you go into an episode already hating it based on what someone else has said. If I'm honest, I do think my negative reaction to the Battle of the Gullet was because of a lot of what I was hearing from the early access reviews massively hyped it up as the best sequence ever. Thus, I was a bit underwhelmed by what we actually got, even though it was serviceable. Which is why for the last 2 weeks, I've stayed away from a lot of preview content to allow me to approach the episode with a fresh mind without any outside influence. And yeah, I think if you've been watching these reviews, it's clear I enjoyed episode 4 and 5 a lot more as a result of that. Like we predicted last week, it seems the roles have reversed and Criston Cole is ambushing the Riverlords on their march south rather than the Riverlords ambushing him. And I don't really mind them doing this for one very key reason. While we do lose Cole's doomed march to Tumbleton, and sadly all of the cool shit that happens on that march, we still do get a different version of the doomed march with the same hopeless feeling as the walls slowly close in. So while the roles are different, it kind of works. I think what this also does is it gives us a chance to see the supposed military and tactical mind that Criston Cole is supposed to have in his burning of the bridges and using terrain as a way to slow the Riverlords' march. Maybe if they had not used the elements lost from the march south elsewhere, such as the Traitor's Feast, maybe I would actually feel a lot differently about this. So the Harrenhal stuff certainly has my intention. I did enjoy the scene of Alys dealing with the sellswords and liked the trick with the bats. I love little details like this, and it shows whoever wrote that scene at least bothered to pick up the book, because, well, Harrenhal is famed for its bats. We also get some deep Harrenhal backstory with a Harren the Black name drop. I'm not sure why they called him Harren the Cursed. I don't recall that name ever being used before. We get a lot of really deep lore this episode, like the Dornish stuff, where they get the gist of it right, even if the details are changed, but I will touch upon that later. My point is I appreciate the effort to include the lore. It seems that Aemond is having visions much like Daemon, but I understand, as much as I enjoyed Harrenhal in Season 2, while they're not spending half the season in Aemond's visions. I think it was clear from the get-go they were going to play on Aemond's mummy issues when it comes to his relationship with Alys, and I don't hate it. The exact nature of their relationship, other than it happening, is vague enough in the books for the writers to really put their own spin on it a bit. My main question here is what's going on with Vhagar. Why has she flown off? I think it's going to be a more practical reason than storytelling than anything else. They save money by not having an animated dragon, and also plot-wise, Alys can't hide Aemond if there is a huge dragon nearby. We also know Alys does have real tangible power. Maybe she did something with Vhagar to get her to flee while Aemond recovers. Given the arc of Aemond, we know they have to reunite eventually. They've given Grandmaster Orwell so much screen time this season, and I actually am really enjoying it. Performance is great, and I love how he's written. Saying that, the fact he suddenly does have screen time does make me slightly worried for his future, especially when he's helping and is friendly with Alicent. It does of course make sense Alicent would go to him for help, and I like he's now warning her he can no longer do so. It fits with his character, it does fit with what his character does the rest of the story. If we don't have the Moon of Madness, then they will have to find something else for him to do. For obvious reasons, they've also given Helena a lot more screen time this season. It's a shame they never did this in season 1 or 2, because I think the lack of connection with the character for the general audience took some of the sting out of events like Blood and Cheese. It makes sense she would be reluctant to take the Moon Tea after that, and I'm glad that season 3 is finally remembering that Blood and Cheese did actually happen. It still vexes me a little bit. There wasn't a conversation between Rhaenyra and Helena about it, or there was no acknowledgement of it at all. I'm also going to be shocked if we don't get at least one scene of Daemon and Helena, given his weirwood visions. It seems odd that he's never actually brought it up to Rhaenyra, that he conversed with her sister, or trying to talk to her about it. Sabatha Frey, what have they done to you? I thought the casting was a bit odd in season 2, but this is one of the negative aspects of the episode for me. It seems they stripped away everything that makes Sabatha Frey such an interesting character, and different from most of the other Freys we meet. In the show, she's almost been written as generic Frey, which is a loss for the show. I think we already knew we weren't going to get Sabatha and Black Aly in the same way as we do in the book, which is a shame given how The Hour of the Wolf ends. I think they included her here to really get across to the viewer that Rhaenyra is struggling to keep her lords happy and already is breaking promises, while also being unable to keep her small folk happy. The walls are starting to close in. I did enjoy Sabatha and Torrhen's gossiping during the small council meeting, and Daemon's utter contempt. I've also enjoyed Daemon and Mysaria trying to one-up each other. Again, this meeting is vital in getting across how Rhaenyra is starting to lose control. You can tell that Aemma Darcy's performance, Rhaenyra's paranoia and lack of trust is starting to grow, and it's only going to get worse. The Gold Cloaks being killed is an interesting choice. It seems we're getting some version of the Moon of Madness, even if it's a very, very different version. Maybe mostly focusing on the shepherd and religious aspect, given the huge MO for House Hightower and Ormund is faith-based. I think what really gets across how dire things are getting is the fact that Daemon is the one speaking sense to Rhaenyra, and how Rhaenyra is simply fueled by paranoia and rage and revenge. And Daemon, of all people, is the one with the cool head. I have been enjoying Larys and Aegon. I think this scene is really being used to get across that Aegon right now, much like Rhaenyra, is fueled by rage and vengeance, with Aemond at the top of his list, rather than retaking his throne. And I think that scene will prove to be vital in showing Aegon's growth as the season goes on, in the sense that he realises that Aemond isn't his problem, isn't his goal. In this scene, we see some growth. He's still blaming everything that happened on Aemond, and what Aemond did fuck him over. A lot of what happened is also Aegon's own doing. This scene is him starting to realise that. I can see the vision the writers have for Aegon this season, and how this new original content might lead into book Aegon's arc. Again, I'm really unsure if we will get the Moon of Madness, and if we do, how much of it we're going to get. But this scene between Alicent and Mysaria has given me a glimmer of hope that we won't just be getting the Hightower religious angle of it, and that Mysaria might actually play a role in the show's version of the Moon more directly than she does in the book. I think they've done a really good job at building a friendship and connection between Gwaine and Criston in the limited time they've had, and I'm glad they did this because it adds a bit more emotional weight to the doom they are all facing right now. Criston's on this suicidal path, and you have Gwaine trying his best to pull him back from the edge and give him hope, but when for Criston it's far too late. He's chosen his course. So the Flea Bottom plot, with the killing of the Gold Cloaks, for me, has me wondering, given the faith connection to House Hightower, if one of the conspirators in this room might be taking on the role of some variation of the shepherd from the book. In fact, one of these men was one of the captains of the guards of the Red Keep, seen in episode 2. So clearly he was a Hightower loyalist, which explains his behaviour in that episode, and I do wonder if this is the person they're going to make the Shepherd. Just something to watch out for. We have a very strong scene between Dennis Reynolds and Daeron, where again, they take the opportunity to do a massive lore drop about Aegon's conquest and the First Dornish War. The show does seem to conflate the conquest and the First Dornish War, well, they're kind of two separate events in my mind, but I did never think I would actually hear the name Mirror Martell uttered in House of the Dragon. So yeah, I do love what they're doing, even if the lore as presented in the show is a bit wonky and not wholly correct. I appreciate the effort to include it. What I love about Ormund as a character is his duality. You get his rage at losing, but also his pride that Daeron actually beats him, if that makes sense. Minting coinage is an interesting choice, but I think they did this to deepen Rhaenyra's concern about Ormund and display his overconfidence. Again, we get some important Helena screen time. This time we see her bonding with Jaehaera. We get a direct call out to Blood and Cheese, which I think needs to happen more often, given how it should have been this massive event, that most characters have seemingly forgotten. Alicent is very cold in this scene when it comes to the prospect of leaving Jaehaera behind. I get Helena is her daughter, but Jaehaera is her granddaughter. She wouldn't leave Helena behind, so why would she be asking Helena to leave Jaehaera behind? After all Helena lost, asking her to leave her child to the mercy of Rhaenyra is crazy. Rhaenyra in the show is not a monster. I don't think she's going to purposely order the death of a child, but her court is full of people who would do such a thing. Surely Alicent understands that risk. A few comments I've seen suggested that this is out of character for Alicent, but I rather think this is more her becoming desperate. So desperate she's willing to make this frankly unrealistic sacrifice. This Baelor and Adam scene was fine, acted well, and I guess it's important with the Vhagar thing. It's one of those scenes that if it were not in the episode, I don't think it matters that much, but this does have me wondering if this is the writers giving Daemon and Nettles's Aemond hunt to Baelor and Adam. I think we do get to see some of Baelor's guilt about the loss of Jace and her role in it, but also shining a light on how she's almost being shunned by Rhaenyra as a result. It does make me wonder how all this is going to work into the rest of the story given book events to come and the larger arc which they have to kind of stick to. The second Harrenhal scene is also very interesting. We get to see how this lack of Vhagar is affecting Aemond's self-worth, and Alys almost encouraging his misgivings about the situation. We also have her playing more directly into the mummy issues side of Aemond as well. Now what is interesting here is we get to see Aemond's view on his relationship with Aegon, explaining some of the logic behind his betrayals. Then in the next scene we have Aegon crashing out over his relationship with Aemond. I think the viewers already understood this, but these scenes in tandem hammer that point home. Aemond resents Aegon for all the torment of their childhood, where Aegon was jealous of the talent Aemond possessed, and the idea that their mother loved Aemond more. What's interesting is we get Aegon acknowledging Aemond as this great swordsman, with Aemond fighting in tourneys, which might be a bit of a continuity error based on some Season 1 dialogue, but in the book we don't actually ever hear anything about Aemond doing this kind of thing, so it does make sense that he actually would have done. We also get some acknowledgement that Criston Cole was an excellent warrior and teacher himself, who was able to mould Aemond into this warrior he is now. It's a shame, I think, that the timeline moved so fast in Season 1. I genuinely think you could have split Season 1 into two 10-episode seasons, aging up the actors after Season 1. I love any scene where Daemon and Rhaenyra are speaking High Valyrian. I can't put my finger on why. I think it's just simply because Matt Smith and Emma Darcy are so good at it. I think thematically it also makes sense for this conversation to be happening in a sept. You have Rhaenyra, who believes she's been ordained by the gods to rule, speaking of the legitimacy of the faith in her rule, and Daemon, who cares little for that kind of thing, holding on to the traditions of their Valyrian heritage that have slowly been eroded away. It's a man who wants to build a new Valyrian empire with Rhaenyra, and well, himself at the heart of it. Again, Daemon is the only one speaking facts in this scene. I think I really enjoy the casual way he talks to Rhaenyra, the self-assurance. He's likely the only person in Westeros who gets away with this. Whenever they do scenes like this in Valyrian, it always takes me back to those early Season 1 episodes with Millie Alcock as young Rhaenyra, and the passionate Valyrian dialogue between Daemon and Rhaenyra. In a way, it adds a sense of continuity to the characters, that this is something they would regularly do. Now this scene of Gawain and Criston is again very important character-wise. You have Gawain being friendly and kind to Criston, trying to dissuade him from this folly, and yet we have Criston resolute on this path that he has chosen. Nothing Gawain can say will take him from it. He sees the course of action as redemption. I think Aegon and Larys' dynamic is very interesting, especially given how calm and nonchalant Larys has been about teaching Aegon these vital lessons. We also have the return of Tywin Lannister, who I feared for a while was actually dead. I also love how ride or die he actually is for Aegon. He joins them without any hesitation. I'm guessing Tywin's book plot is all but abandoned, and I don't think we are going to get the hooded hand element of his arc, if you follow my meaning, given I can't understand at this point how he'd end up in the Black Cells in King's Landing. I do wonder if the fact he's wearing a hood is an Easter egg in reference to that. I don't hate this change. It works with what they're doing with the show, but what this does indicate to me, if they have removed such a large part of Tywin's arc with his injuries he sustains, does this suggest that we won't be spending much time during the Hour of the Wolf and its aftermath? I used to think we'd get an episode or two with just the Hour of the Wolf, but given we have 11 episodes left to finish the show, I think we'll be lucky to get a handful of scenes. I found this whole climbing the cliff element of this scene a little bit dumb, and I don't like how they've kind of taken away lots of Alys's agency that she's shown before here, because we know Alys could have dealt with these men hunting Aemond on her own, as she has done before, and maybe she let the situation escalate to give Aemond some confidence back. I'm not sure. I think the whole cliff climb thing might have been just to try and have this scene in front of the weirwood, if that makes sense. It's nice to see some of the apparent skillful Aemond, who's this excellent swordsman. I don't think we've seen enough of it by far. Bear in mind he's injured as well, so this isn't him at 100%. The last guy he killed is being impaled on a weirwood cannot be a coincidence, given their connection to blood magic and human sacrifice, and the fact we know that Alys had some kind of tangible power. I really hope they're doing something weirwoody with Aemond next week. Again, I really liked this scene where Aegon's crown is discovered, and he kills the camp leader. It's almost like, by doing this, he's regaining some of himself. It's funny, because a lot of this happened because Larys and Tywin were talking way too loudly. I mean, for a Master of Whispers, you think Larys would be a bit more careful. The important bit of info we get here is that Tywin does have some sellswords, which I think is going to be important in the coming weeks, if we know where Aegon's arc is heading. Daemon's speech to the Goldcloaks is great for a couple of reasons, namely that it really gets across how he became the Prince of Fleabottom, but also that is his charm and charisma is what really makes him the Rogue Prince, rather than his skill with a blade or dragon. It does almost seem like Daemon does actually care about the Goldcloaks as well. I think what really sells this scene is Matt Smith. If you've ever watched him in Doctor Who, you know he's great at delivering a monologue or epic speech. I think Matt Smith may in fact have the performance of his life if they tackle the God's Eye in the right manner. I think this scene does give us an insight into Mysaria's motivations. As I predicted, she's not that loyal to Rhaenyra, that she's acting in her own best interest, which does make me wonder if we're going to get some version of the Moon and Madness plotline, with her maybe being the one to rise up with the common people and proclaim some kind of Tristan Truefire character as king. But I really don't think they have time to really do that. But I do still think, as things stand, there's enough of the book in play that we can still get a version of her book ending minus Perkin the Flea. There are so many other characters that could step in to take that Perkin role. The dialogue between Alys and Helena about the window is some of the most heavy-handed foreshadowing I've ever seen. And you know what? I'm here for it. In fact, they framed a lot of shots with Alys and Helena in this room, with Helena always skulking in the background near the windows, or making comments about how she doesn't want to be in the room, etc. Every time she walked past the window, my heart was in my mouth. I will admit, they may actually land Helena's arc, despite all the changes, but they have to make sure they give her a solid motivation and reasoning. The reason I'm questioning that is George R. R. Martin's comments about Helena's arc in his Toxic Butterflies post does still line up with what they're currently doing. They have time to flesh it out and give her motivation. I'm just hoping they do so. So Criston Cole's plan has failed, but what becomes clear to Gawain is he always intended it to do so. Now, I've seen a lot of people clowning on Criston Cole in this scene, but canonically, whether you like him or not, Criston Cole was one of the best, if not the best warrior of his generation. Yes, better than Daemon, having beat him in tourney combat. It's just his legacy as a warrior gets overlooked in the history books because of his reputation as the Kingmaker. Given how they fleshed out his character in the show, where he has been used as a tool by both the Blacks and the Greens, his honour forsaken, it makes sense why he would try and regain some of that with a glorious death. Even now, Gwaine tries to offer him sanctuary, but he's too far gone. Cole's line of songs being sung of him is certainly going to come back and bite him. Given Pate the Lion Slayer isn't in the show, I suspect Roddy or Oscar will be given that line. In fact, I think the Butcher's Ball is going to be very different altogether from the book. I think we'll actually have a proper battle first and have Cole as the last man standing, which is sad because he does try and do the honourable thing in the book and save the life of his men first. I guess we will have to wait and see, but how the approach to Butcher's Ball will have a huge impact on how I look back on Cole's arc, and probably the season as a whole. I don't have much to say about the escape via the hidden passage with Alys and Helena, apart from I have no idea what the hell they are doing with this or what it leads to. We know they're going to get found, by whom is the question. I find it hard to believe that Mysaria knows about all the hidden passages at this point. She's not been in the Red Keep long enough to know them all. Like I said at the start of this video, the Feast for Traitors scene is something repurposed from Criston Cole's Doomed March from the book, and I really don't mind them reusing book elements in this way. I think it was very clear from season 2 we weren't going to be getting a lot of these details in Criston Cole's march, so I'm glad they have found some way to implement some of it. I think this works really well, in fact, here, and really hammers home Daemon's fears for Rhaenyra and kicks off the unrest in the city in a meaningful way. It makes sense now why they gave Luther Largent such a large role so far this season. I will say this, however, I enjoyed this scene, but did feel a little underwhelmed by it. Every preview and early access review I've seen of this episode hyped up this book character's early death as something groundbreaking and shocking. And while yeah, I wasn't expecting Luther Largent to die given he does have a role in the book, the way these posts and articles made it sound was if it was going to be someone really important and vital to the plot. People in my comment section were convinced it was going to be Corlys or Joffrey, something that was going to have a huge impact on the story. Yes, Luther Largent has died early, but his role can be filled by someone else, and it may not even be needed at all. So while I love the Traitor's Feast scene, I was expecting something a bit more earth-shattering. So if you take away anything from this review, I want you to take what these websites and accounts with early access previews say with a huge grain of salt. Not all of them do this, mostly the websites and Twitter accounts, but because it's in their best interests to hype up every little detail to try and get engagement. All it takes is for one of these sites to do this, and before you know it, that one bit of clickbait has become the narrative on social media and Reddit, and starts seeping into the general audience as well. I do my best to stay away from this kind of information for this exact reason, as I think it kills my enjoyment of the show, of these kinds of plot twist moments, from simply expecting too much. But given I make content, it's inevitable I will hear these things. Despite the overhype online, I do think this was mostly a strong episode, and I like the fact some effort was put in to the lore, even if it was a bit janky. Like I said, in every review I've done so far this season, it's all a bit 50-50. For every good thing, there's something that's not great. On balance, I do think in this episode, the good does outweigh the bad. If the last 3 episodes of Season 3 maintain the level of quality of episodes 4 and 5, I would say this season is definitely better than Season 2, but still doesn't quite touch Season 1. As I've said all season, this is feeling very Game of Thrones Season 6. Still entertaining and engaging to watch, but not exactly peak A Song of Ice and Fire. I think I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10 for this week, which if you've watched my reviews over the years is a very high score from me. I wanted to maybe try and give it a bit more, but there are a few scenes this week which I think were a little bit wasted, treading water while other parts of the plot play catch up. If any episode is going to have a hope of hitting perhaps a 9 out of 10 from me, I have a feeling it might be next week with The Butcher's Ball, possibly after that with Tumbleton. Look, I was very down on the first 3 episodes of the season. I think they were poor for many reasons, but While far from perfect, episodes 4 and 5 have been better. After season 2 and all the drama with the blog posts, I came into season 3 with very little hype, excitement, and very low expectations. So the fact I am actually enjoying a lot of what they're doing has surprised me. But my biggest concern moving forward is I simply don't know how they're going to stick the landing with only 11 episodes left, and so much story left to cover. I don't know how they get to that end point and make the ending feel satisfying and not rushed and earned with a proper setup, avoiding the mistakes that Game of Thrones Season 8 made. I think the legacy of House of the Dragon will only be determined after we know if the plane has landed safely, or if it's a fiery mess at the end of the runway.